Moonlight fractured across the ruined cloister as the wishstone screamed. Aria Vale clutched it while wind tore prayers from broken arches. Kade Rowan said, "Let it go before it takes you." She did not. Lord Malachar raised a hand and the air bent. The stone burned like frost against her palm. The warding circle failed, and candles died in a hiss. Aria said, "If I release it, he wins." Kade stepped between power and heartache. The bell tower split with a cry like iron. Sparks drifted like fireflies and ash. Malachar smiled as if mercy were a rumor. He said, "Wish for me, and I will spare him." The offer tasted of rust and roses. The cloister floor opened, revealing a starless well. Kade drew steel that hummed with old vows. Aria whispered a wish that refused to form. The stone pulsed, a heartbeat out of time. The night smelled of salt and lightning. A shadow crossed the moon, and the earth leaned closer. Aria said, "I will not be yours." Malachar answered with a gesture of absence. The world lurched and Kade staggered. The stone chose and light went black. Silence fell like ash after the blast, and the night held its breath. Aria woke on cold stone with the taste of thunder on her tongue. Kade said, "You're still here, so it chose you." She remembered the well of dark and the almost wish. The cloister smoldered, and sparrows lay stunned in shallow water. A grief heavy as iron pressed across her ribs. Kade sheathed the blade with a tired scrape. He said, "We have hours at best before he returns." The moon edged out from cloud, cautious and pale. Aria touched the stone and felt its refusal to be simple. The world narrowed to the path beyond the arches. She rose with shaking knees and a stubborn spine. Hope moved like a bruise, ugly and real. Kade offered a hand that promised nothing but staying. She said, "If I falter, drag me." He nodded once and did not smile. Far peaks answered with white fire, then slept again. The first choice lingered like a phantom kiss. They followed a goat path down to the pine verge where incense sap bled. The valley wore a shawl of fog and old secrets. Kade said, "Sage, Aloan will know a safer road." Aria kept the stone tucked under her ribs like contraband. "The wind carried bells from a drowned chapel," she said. "It answers me in riddles and hunger." Kade watched the ridgeline as if it watched back. He said, "Power keeps its own counsel." A creek stitched silver through black roots. Aria remembered a voice that promised mercy with chains. The memory cut, then taught. Kade slowed, offering pace instead of pity. She said, "If Malachar wanted fear, he has it." Kade said, "He wants your choosing more." A hawk fell and rose with something writhing. The trail turned, and the mountain listened. Hope adjusted its weight and decided to stay. They reached a moss-walled hermitage where candles nested in jars. Sage Aloan waited with eyes like rain on granite. She said, "You pulled the wish too close, child of chance." Aria did not argue with titles she had not asked for. Kade bowed with a soldier's economy. Aloan set tea that smelled of smoke and honey. She said, "The Moonstone binds and bargains." Aria asked what it would demand for a life unbroken. The answer arrived like winter. Aloan said, "A vow clean enough to cut you open." Kade stood by the door, a hinge between flight and fight. The hermitage creaked like a ship at harbor. Aria said, "I will not trade him for peace." Aloan's mouth softened at the wrong courage. She said, "Then learn the price of keeping him." The candlelight trembled as if the room exhaled. Outside, fog crowded the pines and listened hard. Aloan drew a chalk line and set a bowl of river glass. She said, "Speak the wish you refused, then refuse it again." Aria tasted fear and salt, and the stone warmed. Kade said, "I am here, but I cannot help inside the line." She stepped in as if entering a story that already knew her. The floor hummed like hive and hymn. Aria said, "I will not wish for another's surrender." The moon leaned against the window and listened. The bowl flickered with faces and futures unchosen. Eloan said, "Good, now ask for strength that costs you." Aria breathed until her ribs unlatched. She said, "Let me carry the storm without breaking him." The chalk brightened and then dimmed. Kade exhaled as if he had been drowning a long time. Eloan nodded, not pleased but satisfied. Night crept in and found them still standing. Somewhere, a bell rang once and stopped. Dawn thinned the fog to lace. As sage, Eloan laid 3 river stones and a strip of iron. She said, "Names bind, but vows steer." Aria watched the moonstone throb like a quiet bruise against her throat. Kade said, "If he tracks us, he will come by the cliff road." Eloan poured tea that smoked like cedar in memory. She said, "The wish you starved will hunt for food in shadows." Aria felt the tug, soft as a tide and sharp as a hook. She said, "It wants an answer I cannot afford." Kade shifted his weight, a shield learning patience. Eloan drew a sigil and blew on it like a coal. She said, "Say what you are not." Aria breathed, "I am not a weapon for his hand." The sigil dimmed, satisfied for an hour at best. Wind rattled the hermitage door as if a guest had forgotten to knock. Kade said, "We move when the light crests." Eloan nodded and set a single bell on the sill. They followed the cliff road where the sea chewed the world in patient bites. Gulls traced white scripts on the wind. Kade said, "There's a harbor 2 miles east with a silent boatman." Aria felt the moonstone prickle toward the surf. She said, "It hears something older than promises." Stormlight pooled in cracks like trapped stars. Kade touched the hilt in a habit more than threat. He said, "I carried orders once that ruined better people." The road narrowed, and shale whispered under boots. Aria said, "You are not your orders." The wind steadied, tender for a breath. Waves answered with a roar that felt like counsel. Far below, a broken shrine watched the water remember. Kade's shoulders eased by an inch and then held. Aria kept walking, counting heartbeats instead of fears. They reached a wind-carved arch where offerings rustled in weathered ribbons. Eloan's bell chimed once from a pocket it did not inhabit. Aria said, "A gate listens here." Kade stepped beneath the arch and the air tightened. He said, "If I cross first, the road will take my debt." She heard the edge in his voice and the ruins stitched beneath. Aria said, "Debt is not the same as worth." He smiled without showing teeth, a storm trying manners. The moonstone brightened and flared like a small moon finding home. Kade said, "Then walk with me and have the toll." She matched his pace, and the arch loosened its jaw. Prayer ribbons lifted as if reading them aloud. Far off, thunder counseled silence, then relented. They passed through, not unscathed, but permitted. The path descended into a cove where black sand drank the sky. A skiff rocked without oars, tied to a post carved with moons. Kade said, "The boatman asks no questions and answers less." Aria stepped to the waterline as foam curled like lace. She said for 6 breaths, "I forgot fear." He looked away as if that confession burned. He said, "Keep that forgetting when steel speaks again." The moonstone thumped once, a warning and a wish. Wind braided salt into her hair and set it free again. Aria said, "What secret do you carry that drags your gaze to the ground?" Kade did not dress the silence with lies. He said, "I was sworn to deliver you to a different door." The tide drew close, as if to eavesdrop on the damage. Silence shattered when the surf hissed a different name, and lanterns bloomed on distant rocks. Lord Malachar stood above the cove with velvet shadows at his heels. He said, I see the door you did not choose. Aria felt the moonstone brace like a heartbeat learning to fight. Kade stepped forward, regret hanging like chainmail. He said, I will not hand her to your mercy. Malachar laughed, polished sound with knives inside. He said, you mistake mercy for mathematics. The tide rose, counting. Aria said, leave or claim your debt with your own blood. Malachar raised an empty hand, and the skiff line frayed without flame. He said, bring me a wish, or watch the sea take what you treasure. The lanterns went out as if swallowed by a single breath. The cove gave way to a hollow lit by foxfire, where Rowan Heart waited with a grin too sharp for dawn. Aria said, you again, when silence would have been kinder. He twirled a dagger that caught green flame. Rowan said, silence never saves anyone. Kade's jaw tightened, the kind of anger that burned behind ribs. He said, you left us once in the mire. Rowan's laughter rattled loose stones, playful and bitter. He said, and yet you're still alive, aren't you? Aria felt the moonstone stir, recognizing him as if kin to chaos. She said, why follow, if not for coin? Rowan flipped the blade and bowed with mockery. He said, because mischief is a kinder guide than fate. Kade muttered, we'll see if mischief keeps you breathing. Rowan winked, and the path opened with shadows that smiled. The moonstone pulsed harder as the forest leaned close. Aria said, it feeds on our closeness, not the distance. Kade glanced sharply, suspicion hidden but sharp. He said, then what happens when it chooses? Rowan leaned on a stump with careless ease. He said, maybe it chooses hunger over hope. The glow stretched across bark like veins of lightning. Aria pressed her palm to the stone, shivering. She said, it shows me rivers breaking, mountains bending, nothing still. Kade said, that's not power, that's ruin. Rowan smirked. He said, sometimes ruin is the only road to keep walking. The forest exhaled damp secrets, listening without judgment. Aria felt weight and wonder braided into her spine. Night stretched deep, and stars broke open above a clearing. Kade built a fire with soldier's precision. Rowan tossed twigs like dice into flame. Aria said, we risk too much staying still. Kade answered, we risk more running blind. Rowan leaned back, flames painting his grin. He said, stillness invites ghosts. Running invites knives. Choose your haunt. Aria warmed her fingers on the stone instead of the fire. She said, it beats like it owns me. Kade said, then break it before it breaks you. Rowan laughed low. He said, she won't, not while it whispers love. The fire hissed as resin split and the air thickened. Aria whispered, maybe love is the wound, not the cure. Silence answered, heavy as the forest. Before dawn, betrayal bled into the clearing. Aria woke to Rowan gone and tracks cutting east. Kade cursed under breath, dragging his sword free. He said, he'll trade us for coin or chaos. Aria felt a sting sharper than loss. She said, he laughed as if he would stay. They followed into brambles, moonstone beating fast. Birds scattered in a rush like warnings. The track ended at a ruined altar, stones black with soot. Rowan stood with Malachar's shadow stretching beside him. Malachar said, even fools find use when they kneel. Rowan's smirk faltered, replaced by shame stitched with hunger. Aria said, you promised mischief, not treachery. Rowan turned, mouth opening, but the choice already stank of ruin. The altar trembled as the moonstone flared, answering itself. Malachar said, the heart obeys hunger, not vows. Aria's throat tightened, but words came. She said, then you will starve of me. Kade lunged, steel clashing against shadow steel. Rowan stumbled back, torn between laughter and plea. He said, I never meant chains, only a stage. Aria raised the stone high, light cutting through dawn haze. She said, "If ruin is the price, I'll pay it to keep him." Malachar's smile cracked. Rage unmasked and raw. Shadows shrieked as branches whipped like lashes. Rowan fell to his knees. Regret a shackle too late. Kade shouted, "End this before it swallows you." The altar broke open, dust and light swallowing the scene. From the broken altar, a figure stepped into dim light, scars written across his once noble face. Dorian Vane had been a hero, but now his eyes burned with ruin. Aria whispered, "You lived," Dorian said. "Living is not the same as surviving." Kade stiffened, blade trembling at his side. He said, "You swore with me once under the same sky." Dorian laughed hollowly, bitterness sharp. He said, "I swore, and fate wrote betrayal in my blood." The moonstone ached in Aria's palm, recognizing his fractured heart. She said, "You were the vow we all believed in." Dorian's gaze softened, then hardened like tempered steel. He said, "I was, and then the stone turned me hollow." The forest bent low as if listening to the ashes of vow. Silence carried the weight of broken bonds heavier than chains. They walked to a clearing where roots coiled like veins. Dorian led, his voice low. He said, "The stone was never a gift, only a leash." Aria clutched it tighter. She said, "It binds love and hunger both." Kade's eyes narrowed. He said, "And still you wield its ruin." Dorian halted, shoulders hunched like a man carrying graves. He said, "I wield nothing but regret carved in bone." The moon pressed silver through clouds, lighting his scars like rivers. Aria said, "You still bleed loyalty, even if torn." Dorian turned, eyes bright and wet. He said, "Loyalty is the wound that never heals." Kade stepped closer, words heavy as armor. He said, "Then let it scar into strength, not poison." The air crackled with magic that had tasted sorrow too long. A shimmer in the air revealed a new figure, shapes sliding like water. Seraphine Lorne stepped forward, features shifting between faces. Aria whispered, "The shapeshifter." Seraphine smiled with many mouths. She said, "I serve no master, only truth twisted." Kade raised his blade, distrust sharp as steel. He said, "You serve yourself, and that is enough betrayal." Seraphine's eyes flickered amber, then green. She said, "I serve the side that survives." Dorian growled low, recognition thick. He said, "You led me into the fire once." Seraphine tilted her head, unconcerned. She said, "And you walked willingly." The forest shadows thickened, as if choosing sides. Aria's heart clenched, every ally now shaped like threat. She said, "Then show your loyalty before dawn steals choice." Silence folded, promises as fragile as smoke. By the riverbank, whispers turned to heat. Dorian and Aria stood close, too close for old scars. He said, "Once, I held your trust like flame in my hands." Aria's breath caught, old ache stirring. She said, "And you let the flame die." Dorian's eyes softened with grief, but fire smoldered beneath. He said, "I would burn again if it meant your heart." Kade's gaze darkened from the opposite bank. He said, "She is not yours to wound again." Seraphine leaned against a tree, amused. She said, "Love makes fools, and fools make war." The river hissed against stone, echoing their tension. Aria whispered, "Desire is not redemption." Dorian's jaw tightened, but his hand hovered near hers, longing unburied. Kade stepped forward, ready to cut the air between them. The night broke with revelation carved in fire. Seraphine shed her shifting skin and revealed a truth older than stone. She said, The bond you call curse is the key. Aria's knees weakened. She said, "The bond keeps us alive." Dorian nodded, voice cracked. He said, "I tried to break it once and nearly died." Kade's fury burned sharp as loyalty. He said, "Then every choice has been a chain." Seraph's eyes gleamed. She said, "Chains or wings, you decide." The moonstone pulsed, showing visions of ruin turned survival. Aria cried, "It was never weakness. It was salvation hidden." Malachar's voice thundered unseen, "Then salvation will bleed you dry." The forest shook, and every vow made was tested. The night bled into gray dawn as Sage Eloan traced new wards on the ground with a trembling hand. She said, "The moonstone's hunger demands sacrifice, but choice remains yours." Aria knelt in the circle, breath shallow but steady. She said, "I will not trade a soul for victory." Kade stood watch at the threshold, eyes burning with defiance. He said, "If it asks for her life, it will take mine first." Eloan shook her head, grief shadowing her gaze. She said, "Do not bargain with death, boy, for death always wins." The stone pulsed, veins of light spreading across the ward. Aria's chest ached with the weight of every heart that leaned on hers. She whispered, "Then let it take my fear, not my breath." The wards flared and fell silent, leaving only the choice to come. Kade stepped into her shadow and laid a vow before the circle. He said, "I will shield you from every strike, even if it breaks me." Aria turned, fire in her eyes. She said, "Do not bind yourself with chains heavier than mine." He set his jaw, loyalty sharp as steel. She reached for his hand, fingers trembling. She said, "We share this burden, or it destroys us both." The moonstone throbbed harder, light spilling into cracks of earth. Kade whispered, "Then let it bind us, not as curse but covenant." The vow tangled with magic, weaving into flame and shadow. Sage Eloan's lips parted in awe. She said, "You have twisted its design." For a breath, love and power were the same pulse, and both felt holy. The circle shattered with a crack, and the stone in Aria's chest burst into brighter life. She gasped, power crawling under her skin. She said, "It is not ruin. It is awakening." Kade steadied her by the shoulder, eyes fierce. He said, "Then master it before it masters you." The earth trembled and roots surged upward, glowing veins of light. Rowan Heart emerged from the shadows, grin crooked. He said, "Awakening always ruins the sleepers first." Aria's gaze hardened, heart split between trust and betrayal. She said, "Then why return?" Rowan tossed his dagger skyward and caught it by the blade. He said, "Because I cannot bear to see love win without me." The forest breathed deep, waiting for what she would choose. The clearing split open with Malachar's arrival, cloak sweeping like smoke. He said, "So this is love turned into fire." Kade bared steel with a growl. He said, "You'll choke on it before you steal it." Malachar smirked, hand raised. He said, "Fire burns brightest before it dies." Aria stepped between them, moonstone pulsing like a second heart. She said, "It will burn longer than your lies." Malachar's shadow stretched, devouring light in his path. Rowan threw a dagger, sparks flaring as it clashed against the dark. He shouted, "I never liked tyrants anyway." The ground groaned as magic carved scars across soil. Eloan cried, "The price is rising. Choose your stand now." The circle of allies splintered under the weight of choice. Malachar's laughter cracked through thunder. He said, "Your love is your undoing." Aria raised the moonstone, voice steady. She said, "Love is the only weapon worth wielding." The stone flared, blinding, arcs of light piercing shadow. Kade shouted, "Aria, hold to yourself." Rowan stumbled, torn between awe and envy. He muttered, "Always her light, never mine." Dorian stepped forward, scarred but unbroken, voice breaking. He said, "Then let her light guide us all." Malachar's smirk faltered as the magic refused his command. Aria cried, "We are not chains, we are flame." The clearing erupted, storm and fire colliding into war. The battlefield spread beneath the mountain's shadow, ash clinging to the air like memory. Rowan darted ahead with reckless courage, laughter breaking through thunder. He said, "If I fall, remember me as brilliant, not wise." Aria called, voice sharp, "Do not waste your fire on showmanship." Kade sprinted after him, fury in every stride. He shouted, "Rowan, your brilliance will get us killed." Yet Rowan's dagger carved through Malachar's shadow beasts, each strike desperate, but dazzling. Dorian raised his arm to shield, muttering, "He plays the fool, but bleeds like us." The moonstone flared within Aria's chest, answering Rowan's reckless loyalty with reluctant respect. She whispered, "Then let mischief be our shield tonight." The tide shifted, if only by a fraction. Dorian staggered as a wound reopened, blood darkening his sleeve. He said, "My sins return sharper than blades." Aria steadied him with her free hand. She said, "Your scars are not chains. They are proof you stood." He looked at her, voice trembling. He said, "If I fall again, will you remember the man I was?" Kade cut down a beast and spat, "Stop mourning before the fight ends." Rowan grinned through blood. He said, "We'll carve memory together, even if we don't like the ending." The moonstone pulsed harder, feeding on fear and love alike. Aria whispered, "Not one more life to the stone, not tonight." The vow rang louder than thunder. The moonstone broke open within Aria's chest, light spilling outward in threads of silver fire. She gasped, "It carries more than I can bear." Kade grabbed her shoulders, anchoring her. He said, "Then let me carry half." The magic lashed, scorching ground. Rowan shielded his eyes, voice half in awe, half in fear. He said, "You're a star waking, not a girl anymore." Dorian dropped to one knee, reverence written across his face. He said, "She is the answer fate tried to bury." Aria cried out, "It will destroy me before it saves us." Kade pressed closer, steady and unyielding. He said, "Not if I burn with you." The battlefield roared, silver fire against endless dark. Malachar descended, cloak unfurling like a storm-given flesh. He said, "You burn too brightly, child, and fire always dies." Aria's jaw clenched, voice iron. She said, "I burn for love, not for you." Shadows lashed forward, but Kade intercepted, steel clashing against darkness. Rowan flung his last dagger, shouting, "Choke on chaos, you bastard!" Dorian rose, despite blood, drawing his blade with ragged strength. He said, "For every vow you shattered, I rise once more." The ground cracked under the weight of their defiance. The moonstone roared, weaving their voices into its fire. Aria cried, "Together or not at all." The storm shook as if the sky itself chose side. The battle reached its breaking point, every breath a vow. Aria lifted the moonstone high, her voice echoing. She said, "I choose love, even if it devours me." The stone cracked, light spilling into sky like a second moon. Kade shouted, "Then I choose with you." Rowan, bloodied, smirked weakly. He said, "Fine, mischief chooses too." Dorian lifted his blade, voice raw. He said, "And a fallen hero rises with you." Their unity surged, fire braided with love and regret. Malachar screamed, shadows tearing apart under the blaze. He spat, "This victory will be your ruin." Aria's tears burned silver as she whispered, "Then let ruin be beautiful." The battlefield was drowned in light. The battlefield smoldered in silence, smoke curling like unspoken prayers. Aria held the fractured moonstone, its light flickering as if dying. She whispered, "It cost everything, yet the world still turns." Kade placed his hand on hers, voice steady. He said, "You held the sky when it wanted to fall." Rowan staggered closer, bloodied but alive. He said, "And mischief gets no credit as usual." Dorian leaned on his blade, haunted but resolute. He said, "We chose ruin, and still we stand." The dawn broke faint gold, kissing ash with promise. Sage Aloan appeared through haze, staff trembling, eyes heavy with sorrow. She said, "Every gift demands its price." Aria met her gaze with tired defiance. She said, "Then let love be the price worth paying." Aloan sighed, both grief and pride woven in her voice. She said, "You have bound the stone to heart, not to hunger." Kade stood tall, shoulders squared. He said, "We will carry the burden together." Rowan muttered, "Sharing burden sounds heavier than it should." Even Dorian let a faint smile ghost across his face. The air trembled once more as Malachar's cloak lay torn upon the ground, yet his voice lingered like poison. He whispered, "Love will undo you again." Aria closed her eyes. "Tears silver," she said, "let it undo me, and I will rise again." Kade's arm wrapped around her shoulders. He said, "We rise as many times as needed." Rowan exhaled, exhaustion tangled with laughter. He said, "Then let ruin keep tripping us forward." Dorian's eyes burned with quiet redemption. He said, "Perhaps broken vows can be reforged." The world exhaled with them, shadows dissolving into light. They gathered by the river's edge where water ran clear again. Aria held the cracked moonstone above the current. She whispered, "Do I free it or let it bind me still?" Kade touched her wrist. He said, "It is not the stone that binds, it is us." Rowan crouched, skimming the water. He said, "Better a heartstone than a gravestone." Dorian stood silent, then said, "What once cursed me now feels like absolution." Aria's reflection wavered in the current, fractured yet whole. She whispered, "Then let it remain as part of me." The river carried their vow away like song. Night returned with stars spilling silver across the sky. Aria stood on the ridge with Kade beside her, moonstone glowing faintly at her throat. She whispered, "The heart broke, but still beats." Kade kissed her hand, voice raw. He said, "And it beats with mine." Rowan leaned against a tree, smirking softly. He said, "I'll drink to that when I find wine." Dorian rested nearby, scars catching starlight, whispering once fallen, but rising still. The wind stirred their cloaks like wings. Aria lifted her face to the stars, whispering, "Then let love be the wish that endures." The night held their vow eternal.